We start, as we do every one of our evenings, by recognizing and wishing anyone who is ill, whether it be with COVID or any other illness, a full recovery, refuah shlema. We're with you, and we wish you all the best. And to those that have lost loved ones during this very difficult time period, we stand together with you as a community, and we are here for you in any way we can be. So tonight, we are very privileged to have with us Oren Moverman, class of '84, who after graduating Ramaz went back to Israel and served in the IDF and then returned to Brooklyn College. He is an Academy Award nominated screenwriter and Emmy Award winning producer and the co-founder of Sight Unseen Pictures. He wrote and directed The Messenger and Rampart, both starring Woody Harrelson, as well as Time Out of Mind and The Diner, both with Richard Gere. Moverman produced such films as Jennifer Fox's The Tale, Joseph Cedars' Norman, Edo Flux, The Ticket, Kent Jones, Diane, and many, many other films, including Bad Education, which is apropos for this evening's conversation. We are very, very excited to have Oren with us, and we are very much looking forward to what he will tell us this evening and the dialogue between him together with Dr. John Jucovy and Anthony Bregman. Anthony Bregman graduated Ramaz also in the class of '84. They were classmates for many years and went on to Yale. After a career in banking, he found his true calling and began his career as a movie producer and someone that really has made a difference in the world of film. Over the course of his career, he supervised the production and post-production of over 30 feature films. He teaches producing at Columbia University's Graduate Film School and is the co-chairman of the board of the IFP, the nation's oldest and largest industry association for independent filmmakers. Anthony's movies have won numerous awards at the Oscars, the Golden Globes, BAFTAs, Gothams, Indie Spirits, and Cannes, Berlin and Sundance film festivals. He has differentiated himself in so many areas of film, and you might have heard one of his films, the Academy Award winning Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, also Foxcatcher, Sing Street, Indignation. These are just to name a few, and you'll hear a lot more. As I said, he and Oren will have a lot to say during this evening's whole presentation. Tonight, you will see and hear the details of these two outstanding, talented, and Ramaz-reared master filmmakers. And of course, who better to talk about this and to have an opportunity to bring out these two wonderful, wonderful alumni of Ramaz than our own Dr. John Jucovy, the director of Humanities at Ramaz, and someone who has influenced the lives of thousands of our students over the years. They will tonight explore the film industry and the art form. This evening, the Zoom is sponsored by Julia Goodstein, class of '25. She's yet to graduate, in memory of her beloved grandparents, Arlene Goodstein and Saul Goodstein. Thank you all for being with us. John, it's all yours.
Thank you. Let's hope that my sound is on. Hi, guys. In fact, as Michael Altman from the same class would sometimes say whenever Jeffrey Islander and Michael Altman and myself would get into a political argument, Anthony would always say, "You guys," in happy exasperation. So welcome. I'm happy to have you here. Good to see you. You know, I hope this is part of what I really, really want to see developing is more chances for Ramaz to be celebrating on these evenings the illustrious alum, the wonderful lives that our alumni have pursued and what they've accomplished. And I ask myself, why did I invite the two of you then to be the first people to appear? Well, partly because, of course, you represent that goal and that ideal, but also because the two of you, if I'm going to get a little personal for a moment, have been really, really important in my lives. One of the most life-changing moments, or two of the most life-changing moments in my life, was when each of you got back in touch with me. Oren, I think with you, it was back around 1990, 91, a phone call out of the blue. You said, you probably don't remember me, but, and I did remember you. And we've been in constant touch ever since. And I've seen you establish a family and pursue a career and achieve your wonderful achievements. And Anthony, same thing, getting that call out of the blue. It was you waited a little bit longer. I'm still a little bit puzzled about that, but
Oren wouldn't share your number, so.
Okay. Well, I did have it unlisted, but getting that call, was it to see Tammy Faye Starlight?
Tammy Faye Starlight.
Right. Yeah.
Legend.
And we too have been in constant touch. So it's been really, really meaningful to have seen you guys over these years. It's been very, very important to me. But now let's cut to the chase and get to the movies. I call this The Last Picture Show. Oren, you preferred a somewhat different title, but the same meaning. And The Last Picture Show, the Bogdanovich movie theater in a small town in Texas. The movie theater was closed. And I just recently went through this experience out here in Great Neck. The movie theater, forget about the two movie theaters we used to have, but the single movie theater that existed since the 1930s finally closed down. And undoubtedly, it'll never reopen, and it's unlikely that Great Neck will ever have another movie theater. And of course, all over the world before COVID, and COVID has only increased that trend, the movie theaters are closing. And it's not just movie theaters, it's the movie industry. Martin Scorsese, it was almost a year ago today that Martin Scorsese published his piece in the New York Times that was, I think it was entitled An Apology, or called something like that, an apology for what he had said about the Marvel franchise. And of course, it wasn't really an apology. He made some pretty critical remarks about the direction the movie industry was taking. So let's begin with that. Scorsese said that the art form of movie making was disappearing. The experience of seeing fine art in movie theaters was no longer available to most people. Let's hear from you about what you think has been happening in the industry. Do you take an equally pessimistic look? So let's start with, you could jump in actually, but Anthony, as long as I'm calling on somebody, I'll call on you first.
I actually think it's completely overblown. What with all respect to Scorsese, if what he's talking about is a changing framework for how projected films work in large theaters, then yes, film is dead. But that has never been what film is to me. It's never been the idea that film, or even feature films, which is just one type of film, or filmed entertainment or filmed art, is actually, in my mind, is flourishing more than ever. It feels like it's kind of blown out from, when I first started in this business, it was, a film was like a 90 minute to 2 hour work of storytelling. And it was only really able to be seen in theaters. And the kinds of movies that I was interested in were only really able to be seen in certain types of theaters, like the theater in Great Neck, or like in some of the handful of theaters in New York, and in only a small number of cities in the country. And now you can see films anywhere. Now there are films that are being made that you can watch on your that are being made for Netflix and for Hulu, that are still being made for movie theaters. And obviously we're going through a tough time right now because of COVID. But the idea that that the magic of storytelling that happens in a film that Scorsese does, and that many of the great from David Lynch to Truffaut, to like everybody who, all the reasons why we all started making movies and that we aspire to making in making movies, that continues. And not only does it continue in like an hour and a half to 2 hour format, but now you can say, well, I have a story I want to tell, and it doesn't take 2 hours, it takes 4 hours, it takes 10 hours to tell. So let me tell that story over, in a mini series, or let me tell that story in a series that lasts for 7 years. And people can watch it in the same way they watch it there. They can watch it 10 hours at a time, or they can watch it, in hour-long segments. There's so many ways to show movies right now. There's so many ways to present stories in film entertainment that didn't exist 25 years ago when Oren and I were starting out, that it feels like we're in kind of a golden period. But yes, I miss being able to see a movie in a crowded movie theater and experience it with other people. But that doesn't mean that it's over. It doesn't mean even that type of movie viewing is over. It just it means that it's changing.
Oren, but before you talk, my usual rude self, I was so preoccupied with you guys that I didn't get a chance. Oh no, I'm going to say it, to notice that my wife was sitting next to me, and I didn't introduce her, but there was Beth, who's now sitting
Beth.
over there.
Hi, Beth.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Don't be shy, be
I
in the
don't want to have
frame.
my face in the picture, so.
She'll listen from the side.
There's no
Oren.
John without Beth.
That's right, exactly. So Oren, your take.
I have to say that I completely agree with Anthony and absolutely disagree with him.
Okay, thank God.
Thank goodness.
No, because I think what he's talking about is the reality. And the reality is exactly as he said, and I think it's absolutely correct, and it's absolutely what we're going through. But I think then comes the question of what does it mean? And what does it mean for the future, and what does it mean for the art form, which, I know both of us, when we started out, that's what we were into, that, that expression that became a film, that sort of auteurist, kind of like, director driven, work that we equated with art. And the truth of the matter is there's something wonderful happening. We're able to make movies and TV shows that are getting to a ton of people, and people get to experience them and get to, we've never had audiences like, in these numbers, because the truth of the matter is that independent film was diminishing and less people were going to theaters, and streaming and television, HBO, they were sort of taking over and creating the alternative. And all of that stuff is it's just the reality. The question is, what's the alternative? Because we don't want just to have, I personally don't want just to have the reality dictating what's possible. And the truth of the matter is that what's driving all of these work is basically corporations with certain agendas and certain approaches to, how whatever they approve of. And most of these things, I know it's a little bit different for you, Anthony, but most of these things are driven by writers. And the writer approach to film content is different from the director's approach to film content. So I would say that I would agree that, film as we knew it, independent film as we loved it, and we were sort of engaged in, is over in terms of a process. But then what's the next step in terms of the alternative to it? Because we can't just, I feel like we can't just give in to this sort of corporate mandated, approval of what's worthy of being on the air and what's not. That's one thing. The other thing is about communal experiences and about, how are people going to experience these things? And I think we have to kind of zoom back from just talking about streaming or, content that we get at home, and what does it mean for a society? Because so much of what is dictated by this approach is that, you know, it's about isolation. It's about people creating content that gets the people who are already in on this content and are in this bubble of like, if you like this, then you're going to like this. And if you like that, you're going to like that. And so what are the societal implications of basically the destruction of film culture and communities around cinema? And I think that's to be determined. Part of what's heartbreaking about this time is that I think I could speak with Anthony too. Like, we do have a romantic side about, you know, what it means to make movies and what it means to put them in theaters, what it means to go to festivals, all those things. Like, we grew up on that. That's sort of how we came of age in this business. And part of that is over. The next step is, you know, for me, and that's what I've been trying to figure out, is what is the alternative to that? Where, you know, when Marty was writing that article, he was lamenting the brick and mortar experience of cinema, like sitting in a theater with strangers, having that, you know, experience together, and then the ability to talk about it. I don't know where it's going. I just know that there's hopefully, and I'm feeling a little bit of it, this energy underneath it, which is like, this is now mainstream. A lot of what Anthony and I do in this strange way is in the mainstream, is in like, it's the establishment. And so what I'm excited about is the people who want to tear down this establishment or want to create this alternative where some of the old ideas and some new ideas are going to come through, and people are going to have an experience in redefining what a film experience is, what a director-driven medium is, and, you know, how we all sort of, you know, experience it, whether it's just museums or cinematheques or, you know, specialty houses, or whether it's a new form of distribution. But what I'm counting on, and hopefully there's some young people listening to us who will take the mantle. I'm counting on, you know, some resistance to what's going on now, because I think ultimately what's being hurt is a certain kind of critical approach to this work and a certain kind of quality that doesn't factor into what ultimately gets seen.
You know, one thing that, and there are a lot of that you two said that I want to follow up on, but one thing in terms of the present aspects of the model, which have struck me as being positive. So forgive me because we may have different tastes here, but first of all, Anthony, obviously I know you've had experiences with Netflix. Oren, specifically with Netflix, you too?
No, most of my experiences in that world were HBO.
Yeah, okay. Netflix is more of a powerhouse at this point in terms of making movies, or not? I don't know.
I mean,
Well,
what are movies?
You
yeah,
know what I mean. Well, you know what?
Yeah, Netflix is making more. Netflix is making more movies than the rest of the studios combined right now.
Yeah.
Right,
So
and one thing which struck me as being a positive element. Okay, here it goes. I'm going for the, you know, my taste. We recently watched, it was 56 episodes, a Colombian thing that Netflix had, I assume, commissioned, called Her Mother's Killer. Have you heard of it? No.
No.
The first episode, we thought it was going to be the most laughable soap opera, but we had committed to it. It actually turned out to be extraordinarily compelling. But the reason I'm raising it at this point was because the thing that I was, in effect, most moved by was the fact that I was being exposed to these Colombian actors and presumably writers and directors who never would have reached this audience, at least in the recent past. And it brought back memories of when I was growing up and we had the art house and we'd have the possibility of having movies from countries all over the world, which was a disappearing experience in terms of New York City. So it seems to me that there may be some positive features here that are going on as well.
But isn't it interesting that neither one of us has heard of it, and you are basically saying that in the bubble, the Netflix bubble that you live in, that's what you've been engaging with, and you've had that experience, which sounds wonderful. But again, it's just so separate. Each one of us is having a different experience on these platforms.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's to be celebrated, though. You know, I think there's a certain, there's a certain liberation that Netflix has, that Netflix is giving to storytellers around the world and in the US that never existed before, which is, they say, it's just the basic deal is, if they have an audience for it anywhere in the world, and it may not even be in specific parts of the world, it might be 100,000 people in this country, 20,000 people in that country, 2 million people in this country, you know, if there is an audience for it, they'll find a way to make it and get it out to that audience. And that never existed before, you know, that never existed. So people, you know, a lot of people who made fringe movies that, you know, had to make them at tiny budgets, and nobody saw them because there wasn't the mechanism to really reach the people who would be likely to see them. And that existed all the more so in the indie world, in the world of, in the world of, you know, of artistically ambitious movies, because they only played in art house movie theaters, and art house movie theaters only existed in certain cities in the world, you know. And if you didn't live in that city because you happen to live in rural Arkansas, or you happen to live in Africa, you would never come into contact with that movie, or you'd have to drive hundreds and hundreds of miles to see that movie. Now it is being pushed to you, you know, because of your interests and because of your viewing habits that have shown that you are interested in that type of movie, which the algorithms at Netflix pick up on, and then find other things that might interest you. And that is, it's a liberating thing for artists. It's an incredible opportunity for storytellers, and it's an economic novelty for people who are making movies that aren't designed to reach everybody that a Marvel movie is reaching. You know, and I find that there is a certain snobbiness to lamenting the lamenting the disappearance of movie theaters by people like Scorsese, who have no problem getting their movies out in you know, 10,000 theaters around the world every time they make a movie. Well, good for you. Good for you, Scorsese. You've got Leonardo DiCaprio. You've got the, you know, the power of like the Paramount, you know, distribution system. You can get The Wolf of Wall Street out to everybody in the world. But not everybody has that advantage. And what we have now is an opportunity for storytellers who don't have that kind of power to get out there and in ways that usurp the dominance of the movie theaters and the discrimination that movie theaters have to any movie that doesn't automatically appeal to the widest swath of audiences.
And our special guest this evening, Marty Scorsese. What is your?
Let me defend that snobbiness. Let me defend that snobbiness for a second, because it's very easy, and it's actually it's a beautiful reflection of what's happening in our society in general, you know, which is basically, you know, what Anthony is saying is like he's blaming the elitists. You know, he's kind of saying like, yeah, it's easy for you to kind of like go in and say like, oh, I miss my, you know, my childhood. I miss the movie theaters. I miss that, all that romantic stuff that we all wanted to be a part of. But I do think that it's, you know, first of all, you're talking about gatekeepers, right? You're talking about a corporate mandate where gatekeepers are determining what we're allowed to see. And granted, it's a lot of stuff. But a lot of that stuff is not, it's not like everything is available to you. Of course, it's available on the platform, but everything is being segregated. Everything is being divided in terms of like, you, Anthony, will watch these things. You, John, will watch these things. And we're going to keep you separate. We're going to keep you isolated. We're going to keep you at home. We're going to keep you plugged into these things. There's no need to engage with the outside world, and there's no need to understand anything beyond your interest. Wait.
I'm raising my hand.
You said algorithm.
You have to do you have to do it through the Zoom feature. You have to.
I'm talking for the algorithm. I'm talking for the algorithm right now.
I'm joking, Anthony. You can do it that way.
Driving this thing. Now, yeah. I totally agree with you that the potential for creative work is tremendous. There's so much getting made, right? But it's not designed for everyone. It's designed to separate everyone, which is what our society is now. Separated in a bubble, not communicating with any alternatives and anything outside their bubble. And I think that has good sides and bad sides. The good side is a lot of shit is getting done. Sorry, I hope there are not
Oops.
too many young kids that listen to this. A lot of stuff is getting done, and a lot of stuff is not. Netflix makes what, 85 movies a year before COVID, something like that. 80 movies are the algorithms of romantic comedies and things that are make sense, that what we're witnessing is the same thing that we're witnessing in our society. It's the deterioration of any kind of critical approach to material, any kind of critical reading of what is presented to you. And listen, life is hard and things are difficult and COVID is happening and we're all kind of floundering and we all want to just veg out and tune out and get our mindless entertainment in. It's legitimate and I'm not arguing against that. But my question is where's the other side? Where some of us are still interested in the medium in terms of artistic expression, in terms of how the creative applications of the medium and how far can it go? It's limited. There's not a lot of room for it. You made a great film and I'm thinking of Ending Things. That's a sui generis kind of artistic creation that it doesn't happen. It's a great artistic movie, but it's I can point to it because there's so few of them. And so I think, I'm not saying cancel Netflix, I'm just saying now that we have that, isn't it interesting to start thinking about the alternative to that? Because who really wants to belong? Who really wants to be in the mainstream? We want to, blow it up in some way or another.
Yeah, but I think that this is our ability to. I mean, the crazy thing about I'm thinking of Ending Things is that nobody else was going to make that movie. Nobody else was going to make that movie for even half the budget that Netflix gave to make us, gave us to make it. And then when we made it, that more people saw that movie within 30 days of that movie coming out than saw Eternal Sunshine in its entire run. Yeah. Which is mind-boggling. It's right. Mind-boggling.
But that's an acknowledgement. That's an acknowledgement of power, not of quality.
No, but that's an acknowledgement of being able to take. No, look. Just because it's on Netflix doesn't mean that it's quality. But quality can get out to a wider group of people more easily through Netflix than it can through any other medium. Right. And we're able to make. I made another movie that came out earlier this year called The Half of It, which is a teenage Chinese American lesbian riff on Cyrano de Bergerac. Who's going to make that movie if not Netflix? Nobody is going to make that movie, or maybe they'll make it for $3 million, $5 million, something like that. Netflix gave us a much bigger budget to make it at. And when it went out there, that movie hit 30 million people. Right. That's inconceivable that a movie like that would hit that many people in any other medium. And because it is an oddball, weird, movie about fringes of society. And right. so if there's a movie that's going to be able to kind of hit people, change people, make people talk, do things that movies haven't been done, this is the way to get it out there.
Yeah,
you guys are self-starters. I'm going to interrupt you now.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second because I do think that we have to put it in perspective because that's you, right? And we are, by the sheer fact that we're getting things done, we become irrelevant. The question is who, in the grand scheme of things, who there's so many people who are not getting their films made. There's so many people who are not getting that expression.
So your disagreement is being echoed in the chat feature where Naomi High Weinberger says, isn't this actually because of the model that we now have? The model of the blockbuster is gone. Isn't this going to be the heyday of the art film? And then Amanda R, I don't know what the R's for. I wish I did, but Amanda really is taking the more or less the position that Oren has been saying, that the Netflix model, the democratic aspect of that is really no longer there, and they're acting more as those gatekeepers that you were talking about. Amanda Rosen. Okay. So, it's being echoed elsewhere. But I have there are a lot of things you said that I'd like to follow up on, but I'm going to start with this. In terms of the way you would envision movies that's missing now, these isolates that are being created and the community that's being destroyed. And you and I have had lots of discussions about this. But did there ever exist a time when movies performed the function that you wish it would come back to?
I don't think you ever wish to go back to anything. I personally, I wish for things to move forward and change and evolve. But I also,
There is no forward, Oren.
I don't want to.
Time passes through you. You don't
Yeah.
pass through time.
Time moves strangely. I mean, we can be nostalgic about talking about Ramaz, but I hate being nostalgic about film, mostly because I love film, and I do think, at least where I'm coming from, it's acknowledging what's happening and also always looking for the alternative, always not wanting to be a part of the thing that is at the center of it. But I think that everything is evolving, everything is changing. I think we're actually at a stage of human evolution that is actually physical and tangible, and about to get more with some vaccines. So I think that we know what the reality is. We knew it was coming. COVID made it move a lot faster, which is the end of the movie theater, the end of the independent movie theater for sure. We have to kind of reconfigure. So there's a lot of, like, if we fall back on nostalgia and kind of go like, oh, I missed Lincoln Plaza because that's the only way to see movies, I think that's not exciting. That's behind us. But I do think that now that we recognize what this is and how much it is a part of not only mainstream media but mainstream politics, where these platforms, these streamers with good and bad, mixed bag, a lot of good things are happening, and there's a lot of entertainment, as you acknowledge, happening. That's the reality. So people are going to be at home, people are going to consume these products, people are going to get and we're going to get bigger audiences, which is fantastic, and hopefully we'll make good work that is actually engaging and of meaning. But then what's beyond that? What's the alternative to that? About because community is not a nostalgic idea. Community is essential, and dialogue is essential. And I always thought dialogue comes through cinema culture, but cinema culture is pretty much gone for the most part, except the elitist kind of like certain things. So I acknowledge what is good about the streamers. I don't want to go back to anything but what could be created ahead of us. But I think it's just an interesting moment to kind of think like, who are the new entrepreneurs? Who are the people who are going to come up with new ideas of, creating the church of cinema, creating, one of the things that, and I'm sure Anthony agrees with me, like, when the Metrograph started in New York City, that was a real moment because, you go on a Sunday afternoon to watch, a Kurosawa movie, and it was packed for every screening, and it was all young kids. And it was just exciting to see that people are excited about getting together and experiencing a 3.5-hour Japanese movie. And, what does that mean? And how can we create, an environment where people are communicating and people are not, feeling isolated and alone? Because before COVID started, we had this moment where, like, I think the Surgeon General under Obama said, when he was asked, what is the biggest epidemic in America right now? And he said, isolation, loneliness. And I think that we're about to experience a mental health pandemic that is coming out of COVID, but even before that, coming out of the fact that we're all glued, in our living rooms to these screens. And I think that it's responsible to think there's great stuff about streamers, there's great things happening creatively, and a lot of green lights that wouldn't have happened any other way with wonderful audiences. But then how do we take care of what is healthy for human beings, which is community, which is togetherness, which is dialogue, which is culture? And I think that's our challenge, and I embrace the challenge.
So this gives me a chance to actually get to
Anthony, I was just,
your own personal development in terms of the movie industry. How did you end up in movies? I mean, what are your memories and experiences that brought you to make movies as you two do? Anthony, why don't you start? You talked about the magic of movie going and Kurosawa How do you explain that you came to the movie industry?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but let me say that from a very fundamental way, that I love the playfulness of telling stories visually. You know, I love films, you know, and I love films because they are able to provide, you know, on both a kind of larger philosophical level and level of detail, level of characters, these great storytelling techniques, these great ideas of how to how to express big ideas, small ideas, personal ideas, make things sad and funny, and in a way that doesn't exist in any for me in any other way that's as satisfying. And that's what drew me into films, and that's what made me love watching films to begin with, which I should say started in your film class, which was the first time that I, you know, was able to think of films in a critical sense and start breaking them down and start understanding what it is, how they're made. And that's what I love doing on a regular basis every day. I love being on set. I love being in editing rooms. I love being now in virtual editing rooms. I love working with composers to create the emotional musical scores. I love all the different aspects of how films come together and how stories are told. And so I came to it out of really a love and appreciation for, you know, great storytelling. And I stuck with it because the process of making films was just as fun.
Telling stories.
I know that doesn't totally answer your question, like physically, how did I get my first job?
Well, it's your first stab at it. You're not going to totally answer it. Rachel Rabhan, the art teacher at the upper school, and I are working on a storytelling project, which will involve the visual arts as well. But yeah, we love telling stories, don't we? And you get a chance.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm thinking of making a movie, and there's a project I want to get involved with, whether it's a pitch or a script I've read or a book that I've read or an article or something that someone in my office told me about, that the way I'll test it out is I will tell it to like lots of people. I'll tell it to my wife. I'll tell it to my kids as a story, as a storytelling, and see how I can work through in like a verbal storytelling way, something that makes it sound interesting and that kind of like runs it through in my mind over and over until it feels like something that's worth spending, you know, a year and a half or more of my life on. That's really what it's all about. It's about, you know, storytelling, and this is the most effective way we've had, you know, of telling stories, you know, I think, you know, at this point in history.
I agree with you. Oren, how'd you end up there? Not here, but in movies.
You know, I've been dreaming about movies since I was young. I grew up in Israel with very little exposure to anything creative. I never met anyone creative. I never really saw movies until I was a little older. But for some reason, and I cannot fully explain it, I always knew and felt drawn to filmmaking. I came to New York after the military, saying, you know, goodbye to my family. I'm going to go to New York and become a filmmaker. I had no idea what that meant, but it sounded right. I was, you know, like Anthony, I think I was very much influenced by your class on movies. And I remember
the first time I ever taught that course. You were quite a group.
Yeah,
It's quite a class.
Yeah, and I think that it crystallized it, and it definitely got me into the headspace of kind of trying to figure out what movies were. But you know, it was just, I hate to sound so limited because, you know, I'd like to think that I'm more than just like, you know, a cinephile, but it just never seemed like there was any other option. I was, as a kid, you know, movies were my escape. Growing up in Israel, you know, a particular class that I come from, because Israel does have class, by the way. You know, I was not exposed to many movies, but I would watch these Egyptian movies on Friday afternoons that were broadcast on our black and white TVs, and they were completely cheesy and ridiculous, and they just blew my mind. And you know, I came to the States and for a few years and went to Ramaz, obviously, and by the time I was 17, my parents went back to Israel, and I was on my own in New York. I was emancipated, literally, and I started going to movie theaters on my own and just exploring it. And it just felt like this is what I have to do. Unlike you two, I hate storytelling. I have no desire to tell stories. I have a strong desire to create things out of nothing. But stories are not that meaningful to me. Images are, and various artistic expressions are, but you know, I personally I just got very lucky and ended up actually making these things.
That in a moment I'm going to actually show some clips that you guys supplied for me. Yeah, I remember, you know, growing up, coming after school, we had something called $1 Million Movie, which had the RKO film library, and I'm glad I was exposed to that. And I am, unlike the cheesy Egyptian movies, and this is going to sound horribly snobbish, but I'm going to go for it anyway. I am forever grateful that I grew up with two parents who took me to see Kurosawa movies and Bregman movies. And in our family, there were things that we were not allowed to watch. I mean, like in every family, there are things that are rated, not watchable by children. And in our family, it was The Sound of Music. And I'm being totally serious. My mother would not let us see The Sound of Music or It's a Mad, 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 Mad World because it's just trash. And
really, Stanley Kramer, really?
Well, I've never seen It's a Bad, 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 Bad World, so I couldn't tell you.
I would not. Don't knock It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. That's a pretty great movie in its own. In like you know, just like Hard Day's Night is a great movie, even though it's like it's not, you know, technically a great movie, but it's but it's reflective of a time that It's a Mad, 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 Mad World is
You're
as
lucky
well.
that I'm not cutting you off at that statement about Hard Day's Night. Would you agree that the Marvel franchise they're not great movies?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Oren.
No, I'm not. I think that, like, listen, we have a segment of, you know, of our business that is a theme park experience, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not my taste. It's not my desire to be engaged in that. But you know, as long as, you know, if anything, it just clearly exemplifies what we need, what I feel I need to fight against. But I'm not going to beat that. I'm just going to, you know, try to create an alternative to that, and hopefully people will still be engaged in something that's beyond the cartoonish element of filmmaking.
And Anthony, you had a contrarian thing to say about that.
Well, I mean, they're not for. I kind of agree with Oren. I far be it for me to say it's a good movie or a bad movie. It's not for me. It's not the kind of movie that I'm interested in seeing. And I think that for the most part, when I see a lot of movies like that, I kind of get it like 15 minutes in, and then I'm bored for the next, you know, 2 hours. And then in the last 15 minutes, it's nice because they all come together and help each other out. And that's how and it feels like there's like a formula there but a lot of people like those movies. So it's, you know, is it a good movie or a bad movie? I mean, who knows? It's like it's different strokes for different folks. And I don't know that it's for me to say what is good for me is in some objective way quality, and what is not is something else. You know, people have different things. I may not like your Colombian 56-part Colombian series, or I may love it, but it doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It means it's for me or not for me.
The biggest argument we've ever had in this family was when I said that, objectively speaking, vanilla ice cream is superior to all other ice creams. I meant it as a joke.
I'd say, objectively speaking, Vanilla Ice is not superior.
You know, Oren, you
to-
mentioned nostalgia before, and it's two comments had come up, one from Ben Schiff and one from Liz Islander, which talked about kind of like this theme park thing, added the idea. Ben was talking about Netflix is buying up these famous theaters, the Egyptian theater in LA, and movie theaters like that. And I can envision that we're going to be reaching a point where we have kind of like the baseball version of the retro stadium, that we have the retro movie experience. And Liz was making a similar point that.
Well, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be too bad. And to Netflix credit, that they do have a theatrical model for some of their films and some of the better films. So obviously we don't have it right now, but I think that if they hold on to an understanding that this value in the theatrical experience, I think that would go a long way. And obviously nostalgia isn't what it used to be. I always think, I always think about the fact that nostalgia.
Trying to wrap my mind around that one, isn't that?
No, I always think, nostalgia used to be the term, the very early, one of the first terms for PTSD, what we call now PTSD. It was the longing to go home was called nostalgia, like during the Civil War. It was a French term, nostalgie, that people were, kind of classifying these soldiers who are not doing so well. So I have mixed feelings about the meaning of nostalgia. But listen, I love movies. I have to be honest, except if Anthony, produces something, I'll watch it on Netflix. But for the most part, I watch old movies. I think we're on to the next.
No, I'm just getting it ready. I didn't mean to stop you.
Oh, that's okay. I don't need to be on.
So in other words, we're even nostalgia for nostalgia nowadays.
Well, I mean, I spend most of my time watching old movies when I watch anything, and I get a great pleasure out of it, and I feel like a lot of them, even I'm down to like the B movies, but I'm feeling like I get a great pleasure out of that 2-hour experience where I could be like a has-been, and it's okay, like it's totally fine. That's my speed, but I think that if as long as people value communal experiences, value healing experiences, value dialogue, conversation, engagement, then we have a chance. If we give up on that, then I will not use the word, but
But can I say that I know that there's a clip about to run, but just like the Metrograph model that you talked about before, which I totally agree with you is an interesting thing, is the backwards model of what it used to be up until very recently, that a movie would come out in a movie theater or in many movie theaters, and then it would have its theatrical run, as it's called, and then it would go to VOD or DVD or show up on TV and all that stuff. Now, what the Metrograph is doing, which might be our model for the future of communal storytelling, of communal theater going, is that they're saying, look, it's too many people are burnt by going to movies that they don't know are good, and they with critics that they don't totally trust, and they have and it's their one night out, and they go out and then they see a movie and it's not a satisfying movie, and then they don't go back to the movie theater because the last time they went out they saw some movie that was supposed to be good and it wasn't. So what the Metrograph is doing, and conceivably what Netflix is doing also with the Paris and the Egyptian, is that they're flipping that around and saying, you know what? You can see all these movies on Netflix or on Hulu or on iTunes or something. But if you want to go see The Godfather in a movie theater, and you know what? Who doesn't want to see The Godfather in a movie theater? It's going to be a great night out. It's going to be a satisfying movie. So these are movies that are doing the reverse. They're establishing their credibility as great movies on streaming services, and then places like the Metrograph are picking them up and having showing them to people who probably have all seen these movies before, but now want to see it in a communal setting. And please God, you know, with COVID, when COVID's done, that will come back, and people will feel safe going into movie theaters and seeing things that they feel are worthy of risking their night out, and they know they're going to have a good time.
I agree. Amen.
I agree too. I just wonder whether, I mean, having that experience, I feel like the last time that my family had it was it Cure that we went to see? The Japanese movie. There was a Japanese movie that we went to see, and it was one of those great experiences where after the movie ended, everybody gathered in the lobby to say, what was that? And that was, those used to be great moments. I know that they can take place online. I'm not sure it's the same. So I asked these guys to pick a favorite clip from a movie they didn't make, as well as a movie that they did make. But here we go with this one, chosen by Mr. Bregman. The free market system.
But we'll never accomplish.
I've never seen that movie. My mother would not let me go.
To the Hudsucker Proxy?
Yeah, not yet, but I will watch it. That's a delightful scene.
Look, that you know, that's not a movie that I made, but it's a movie that I love. But that sequence is some of the purest, most ecstatic film storytelling that exists. Not a word is said. It's the story of a company turning around. It's a story of like people. It's in a way, it's a story of filmmaking. It's like, what can you do with with a circular piece of plastic? You know how how that can turn around by someone's creativity, and it's being all told without a single word, and in a way that is both like the type of storytelling that existed on screen at the time that this film is set, even though this film was in the 90s, I believe. That it's a story being told as if it were a silent film, and it's one of the it just makes me happy.
So I've discovered that I formed my movie taste, and I had my favorite movies, and then in thinking about them, I discovered my favorite movies tend to be self-referential movies about movie making. So I can appreciate what you're talking about. Oren, what's your comment on this scene?
It's pure joy. It's the magic of cinema. It's just I love that movie, and I love that choice. I also, as someone who makes a living writing screenplays, I appreciate no dialogue in scenes, but it's a magical movie.
Let's show something equally magical but very different. Your choice. Well, two very different scenes. Oren, why this one?
Oh, why not? There's so many reasons. I think one of the first conversations when I came back to the States that I had with Anthony was how much we cared about this movie and how much this movie made us want to be involved in film. Every frame of it is artistically accomplished and kind of perfect and provocative. That particular scene is about, killing your professor. So it's a bit of an homage to you, John. And the old Buddhist of if you see your master on the road, kill him. But because there are no masters. But it's also, from an artistic perspective, it's just one of the films that really made me want to be a filmmaker. From a specific perspective, I think it's about what we're talking about, which is the world of illusions, the world of shadows, which is, the kingdom of shadows, which is what movies are. And then, obviously the Plato story is about philosophers and how they see the world in a way that's different from the people who are enslaved by, the illusions of reality, but in the world of fake reality, that is kind of the struggle of the moment. So I don't know, there was just something about that scene that was completely appropriate, and the other part of it is I chose it completely in random when I saw Anthony sent a scene. I thought I should set the scene.
You better set the scene, and it's about movie making too.
Yeah, it's about light. It's about playing with light. It's about how light affects.
Yeah,
I think if there's one movie that movie has everything that is both, masterful about movie making and joyful about movie making in it. It's a movie that if you had to say to someone who wanted to make movies, you say like, what should I study? You should study that movie.
Yeah, it's also quite an achievement in cinematography, and obviously, the metaphors are very, very clear in terms of the use of light. But it's also about, fascism, and it's about like, that particular choice where, a particular moment in history, which is for me very important in making movies, which is to plug into some kind of political or social idea and kind of explore it. And that movie means the world to me.
I want to ask you to one last thing to talk about, and then we all have to go. I have to go to an open house class that I'm teaching shortly on maps. Very exciting. And where does Ramaz, your memories of Ramaz, fit into who you are now? Don't rush.
First,
Me first. Honestly,
Talk a little bit about it, but I'd like to hear more.
I mean, honestly, and I don't think I even told you that, John. You know, I started going to Ramaz in 10th grade, so I only had 3 years of Ramaz. I'm a fake Ramaz student. But, I went to Ramaz at a time in my life where my home life was very difficult and very complicated. And, my parents, made sure that it would be very complicated. And I don't think people knew it at the time, but I would go to Ramaz sometimes. I'd show up in the morning after a night of no sleep, or it was like it was a pretty schizophrenic experience because my home life was horrible, but Ramaz was kind of a shelter, and I was thinking about it a lot today, and kind of trying to remember it. I don't have one bad memory of Ramaz. I have only wonderful memories, and I was a bit of and Anthony, tell me if I'm like misreading my presence at Ramaz, but I felt like I was a bit of an outsider. I was an Israeli, which gave me a lot of credit, but I was not really engaged in everything. I didn't go to any of the classes, the extracurricular activities. I was, but I think that there were teachers at Ramaz. One of them is on this particular call, who changed my life and who really provided a lot of comfort and a lot of healthy, mentally healthy experiences. And there were 3 of them that I could think of. There were probably more, and I think Ramaz was a place where I could just feel safe and engaged. And I basically came to Ramaz politically. I was functionally illiterate, like I did not understand anything political coming into Ramaz, being from where I was in Israel. And by the time I finished Ramaz, I was pretty much set on the road to ultimately who I am today. So, I don't want to be too provocative by mentioning atheism and anti-Zionism, but ultimately it put me on that road, which was very healthy for me and very much an intellectual engagement that I wouldn't have gotten with my background. So yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about my experiences of Ramaz. Of course, I can tear it to pieces in terms of the politics and what I feel about, diaspora, Judaism, and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I'm very grateful and very grateful to you, John, specifically.
Whoops, Anthony.
I mean, I feel the same. I think Ramaz, was a place where it was really valued to be, a critical thinker, and where it's really valued to like be smart and to be kind of questioning things. And I think the thing that I got out of it was a real like appreciation of the value of kind of like how to like handle your brain in the world. And I think that was that's something that my friends who went to other schools didn't have at all. You know, they had other things, but I think I felt like I came out of Ramaz with a real ability to think through situations, to understand themes that were going on that may not be on the surface. And from you, John, especially, you know, both in your classes as well as in debate team, was the ability to be kind of like outrageous, to take like wild positions, to question authority, and to use kind of your brain as like a you know, as a tool, as a weapon, as like a you know, as a forceful object. And I think I took away from your, like, you would say things that in class, I remember that I'd be like, oh my God, did he just say that? Did he really? It's like, can somebody say that? And then you go in and you defend it. And then, and we would be in positions where the thing that we thought was completely outrageous, we couldn't even argue against. And that was, you know, you know, that was great modeling behavior. I've been doing that for the last, you know, however many years since I graduated, because it was something that taught me it was fun and it was useful, and I use it producing every day, whether it's, you know, the using it in diplomacy, or using it in negotiations, or using it is in terms of critically thinking about a script, a movie, a cut of a movie, you know, anything. Is like to value the ability to see through issues, take positions that are controversial, defend those positions. That was something that I got out of Ramaz, and I think I got particularly out of the you know, being your student.
Thank you. Of course, I didn't mean anything I ever said.
Yeah, not to let you off the hook, but like, how do you feel hearing all this?
Grateful to Ramaz and to its students. I'm being totally serious, and for still being that kind of a place. We have goals that we want to achieve as a school, a mission that we want to achieve. People make their own independent choices, which don't always accord with the details of that mission, but it is a place of challenge, inquiry, openness, and it produces people like yourselves. And I'm looking at all those names here tonight and the participants. I think it's a very unique place in the Jewish day school world, but also in the world of education, Mr. Rockland. But I'm grateful.
Such as everybody is saying, John, that's for sure. For all of us that had the privilege of having you as our teacher and continue to have the privilege of having you as a colleague, that is for sure.
And a friend.
Yeah, that's been a wonderful experience. Thank you guys for making this time. I know I've been putting pressure on you for a while now. I'm really grateful to you for being here.
Anthony, Oren, thank you. This was an amazing evening. John, as always, thank you for your moderating and for helping us to coordinate this. Oren and Anthony, I'll say it very openly. I know there are many people who have many questions to ask you, and I know you're very generous with your time, always for Ramaz. And so I'm sure that people will reach out in various ways, but we'll let John be the conduit rather than have an open dialogue. But thank you again for being with us and for making us very, very proud to call you our alumni. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. There'll be a schedule coming out of some additional Zooms that will be coming up very shortly. And those who would like to also use some of John Jucovy's classes, John will be sharing some of his links for some of the classes that he's going to be giving. So we'll look forward to having you on those as well. I wish everybody a great night. And once again, thank you for joining us.
And next time, pure gossip about Hollywood, okay? Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, thanks for having us.